frankly, was through experiences of family members. I'm very honest about my background in that I have more criminal convictions in my background in terms of my family than I do college degrees. So I was very privileged to be a first-generation college student, to graduate from UNC Chapel Hill and then go on to UNC Chapel Hill School of Law. Like most people and most women, they say it takes a woman 7 times to be asked to run for office before she takes it seriously. I was, living my best life as an attorney, traveling the country, serving my community through serving on several boards of directors, immediate past chair of the North Carolina Foundation for Public School Children, and I got a call one day from a mentor of mine who suggested that I run for office. I am someone who has literally advised elected officials when it relates to education and voting rights, and I've been on the outside marching and screaming and advocating for the things that I believed in, but I never imagined that I would have the opportunity to actually sit at the table as opposed to influencing individuals that actually sit at the table and make the decisions. So it took me a little while to wrap my head around the fact that, marching outside is one thing. Being at the table and being a decision maker is a totally different thing. And for a while, I didn't believe that Wake County would elect a young black woman.
Mm-hmm. The youngest black woman.
The youngest black woman. And not only the youngest black woman, but the youngest person in Wake County's history to ever be elected to the Wake County Board of Commissioners.
Oh, wow.
Several years into that tenure, I'm now chair of the Wake County Board of Commissioners, going into my 2nd year, each time being elected unanimously by some colleagues that are literally twice my age, and empowered to lead and help facilitate a budget that supports over 1 million constituents, $1.5 billion, and a staff of over 4,000 people. And one thing that I consider to be one of my most prized attributes as a leader is that I very much believe in using my personal story, my personal testimony, as sort of guiding principles to the way that I lead. I am someone who at some points during my childhood was homeless. Mm-hmm. And so when I ran for office as a commissioner, I made housing and housing affordability one of my platforms. I'm someone who grew up on free and reduced price lunch. So I made addressing child hunger and creating food pantries and food opportunities for students over the summer or over extended breaks. So I very much believe in using my personal testimony to drive the areas that I give my attention to. When it comes to my recent decision to run for North Carolina Commissioner of Labor, again, I tend to not do anything unless I'm just very passionate about it. Otherwise, I'd rather travel. And so my mother, again, who actually dropped out of high school in order to have me, she worked at a meat packing plant in eastern North Carolina to help provide for myself and my younger siblings. At one point, due to inability to take a break or fear of taking a break, she ended up getting her hand caught up in a machine. Her right hand, and that machine essentially at a meatpacking plant ripped through her hand. And I still remember as a child going to the hospital and visiting my mom and saying, what's wrong with you? Right. Get out of that bed, let's go home. Why are we here, and why can't you leave and go home with me? And she ended up having several surgeries on that hand and was never able to, moving forward, realize her full earning potential. And you're talking about someone with already a limited earning potential because she didn't graduate from high school. So in thinking about running for North Carolina Commissioner of Labor, that is something that moves me very deeply, to make sure that North Carolinians across the state have safe and healthy work environments. Many people may not realize that in 2017, which was the last year that we have data for, we had 183 people to die on the job in the state of North Carolina. And I'm not talking about individuals who died of a heart attack or of natural causes. I'm talking about many of those deaths that maybe could have been prevented if a building had been inspected, if proper protocols had been followed.
What was the plant in Raleigh that caught on fire? like you've heard about the Hamlet, what happened there, but you haven't heard about as much.
There was a explosion in Durham recently, where an individual died. And again, I'm not saying all of these issues are preventable, or that ensuring regulations would have prevented these particular things. But when we have a commissioner of labor in office that is relaxed about inspections, that is relaxed about enforcing regulations, then it lends to these things becoming more frequent, and the reality that someone could go to work to make a living for their family and not come home. So one of my top priorities when it comes to serving as Commissioner of Labor is to ensure safe and healthy work environments, to make sure that workers don't go home with injuries, that workers actually have the opportunity to go home. And that's very important to me. I want workers who go to work for a living to be able to realize their full potential, unlike what happened in my mother's situation, and she was never paid accordingly. She was never, given her due course, and I don't believe she ever even got an attorney to fight to get the funds that she very much needed for her 5 children.
Now, just back up for a minute, to even go from the upbringing that you were brought up in, how did you even get to the point where you went to college? Like, even believed in yourself to be able to afford that? Like, how did that come about?
That is a great question. Many of, I would say educators in particular, sort of instilled a belief in me, because I certainly didn't have it. Because I didn't have anyone to sort of look up to in that regard. I didn't say, I'm going to be like my mom and my mom's mom and go to college.
Right, breaking that cycle.
And, I ended up actually being raised by my grandmother, who had about a 5th grade education. She would always say this: if you're going to stay here, you're going to get your education, or you're going to get out of here. So she would always stress, whether I had homework or didn't have homework, reading. If you don't have homework, you're going to read this Bible. If you don't have homework, you're going to read this magazine. Never mind the fact that we didn't have books in the household. Like, I don't have a childhood memory of someone reading books to me. But she was very stern about making sure that I did my homework and that I excelled in school. And more importantly, that I did not hang out in the neighborhood. And I remember growing up thinking, she is so mean. She is so mean. Everyone's outside, they're at the racetrack, and she's just being mean for the sake of being mean. Right. She won't let me live my best life. But in hindsight, those same people that were doing those same things that I wanted to do, when I look at their life outcomes and I look at mine, and I appreciate the values that my grandmother instilled in me. I appreciate that she made me read when I wanted to go play around in the neighborhood, and that she stressed the importance of getting an education and doing something different for myself. So between my grandmother and educators telling me, did you know that you could actually go to college? At best, I thought military, because I grew up in a military town off of Camp Lejeune, and I thought, if I'm going to make it out, then, that was the only route that I saw in terms of doing something different from what I had seen from other family members. And it was educators and teachers and counselors who were like, you're really smart. Excellent grades, an athlete in high school, leader, class president, and other clubs, very big in the drama club, which I actually credit for my ability to speak and really share my voice with the world, because I had a drama teacher who literally took my face and she did this. She said, Jessica, and she held my mouth open, and she said, Jessica, open your mouth, because you have something to say and people need to hear you. To the remiss of a lot of people, I've been talking ever since, and speaking up for myself and speaking up for my community.
We appreciate it.
And I'm very grateful for women leaders like my grandmother, and women leaders that were educators in a very small community in rural eastern North Carolina in Pender County, who said, did you know that you could go to college? When it really hadn't been on my radar. And then I got to college and had the opportunity to realize this is normal. This is not extraordinary. And I can not only go to college, but you mean I can go to law school too? Mm-hmm. And I just ended up having this amazing village of people along the way who kept saying, you can. And I'm saying, are you sure? Are you sure? And with each step and with each success, I began to be confident in myself and finally believe that I could attain my educational goals, that I could be someone who represents 1 million people in Wake County coming out of a non-majority minority district, which is rare in and of itself. And with things like gerrymandering happening all across, North Carolina, we can't just accept the districts that are given to us that are majority minority. We have to be able to win in areas where no one thinks we can win. And that is exactly what happened.
Now, just thinking back up to your youth, is there anything that you would say to the younger version of yourself to make sure that you stayed this path and to believe in yourself? There's something that even maybe a story that you remember from your childhood that you're like, this was so close that if this didn't happen, I wouldn't end up here.
I would tell my younger self to cry, and that is okay.
Okay.
But to then get up and put one step in front of the other. There's a saying, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Don't try to take on the world by yourself all at once. And that on some days, it's just enough to wake up and put one step in front of the other. I'll never forget being in college and having $14 to my name and no transportation. And I went to an ATM on campus and I couldn't get out the $14 because I needed a multiple of 20. And I had no transportation to be able to get to a bank so that I could walk into the bank and get out the $14. And there were so many times where I just cried and I wondered if I belonged. And that's a feeling that doesn't go away, by the way, because as you climb and as you go to each step, as you go from college, as you go to law school, as you get your first job, as I serve in office, there's always this fear of, do I belong? Am I smart enough to be here? There are all of these insecurities, and sometimes I just have to get on my knees and I have to pray and say, God, if I don't have the words or if I don't have the answer, speak through me. Let them see you in me. Let me be worthy to share and to serve these people. And some days it's all I can do to just wake up and again put one step in front of the other, one foot in front of the other. And some days that just has to be enough.
That's wonderful. Now, has there ever been a thing or an incident that happened where you were just like, okay, I'm giving up, and you were able to push through anyway, or somebody that you reached out to that helped you overcome that?
I actually did give up. Okay. And if you were to Google me right now,
I know.
And Google Jessica Holmes resignation, I had gotten to a point on the board where I felt like my voice wasn't being heard. I was the youngest person ever elected, and quite frankly, in 2014 at that time, I felt so beloved by the Democratic Party. I felt so beloved by the people that I was interacting with. And however, when I became elected, it was, you sit over there and we'll figure this out.
Oh, so the tokenism.
And you don't need to be a part of this conversation. And I ended up in a situation where I felt like I was told to smile and, look pretty in my seat and let the world think that everything was okay and that I was involved and that my voice mattered. When in reality, I would go home at night crying and upset because I wasn't involved and my voice didn't matter. And the issues that I had promised people that I would work on were not the issues that were making it to the board table, even for discussion sometimes. And I started to see some individuals say things to certain communities, but then get to the board table and vote differently. Or not even allow an issue to come to a board discussion when they had made promises to particular communities. So I got to a place where having a seat at the table was no longer sufficient. And having a title was no longer sufficient. I can serve my community. I can do good things without being in office. And that's real. I don't like when people use the excuse that, I'm going to serve my community when I get in office. I'm going to do this and that. I'm going to focus on these issues when I get in office. Your work in the community should precede your run for office. And so when I was in a situation where I didn't feel like I was being heard, or I didn't feel like I was truly serving and doing the things that I came here to do. I said, you all can have your title. You all can have your position. I will not sit here and smile and take pictures with you and be a token. I will not be a token leader. I'd rather be a leader than to be someone with a leadership title. And I quit. Live TV, cameras rolling. My mother didn't know. I told my pastor, and I hadn't told anyone else. But I waited until the conclusion of a meeting. Prior to that, a housing vote did not go the way that I expected it to go, the way that it should have gone. And other things were happening. And I said, thank you to Wake County for allowing me the privilege of serving you. It has been one of the greatest joys of my life. At this time, I choose to spend my time, energy, and efforts elsewhere. And the very next day, the same person that I had previously that day expressed my concerns to about feeling left out, not feeling included, feeling like I was a token. And their response essentially was, well, that's what you were elected to be. And that helped me make my decision. So got to the board table, cameras rolling. I made statewide news.
I think it was national, actually. Because I'm pretty sure I heard about it, like, from my dad. Did you hear what happened in
Quite possible. Because you had what was a lot of people perceived to be the darling of the Democratic Party. You had this perfect candidate in this black woman with these credentials and all of these things, and she has this story and people like her and she's relatable and she's approachable, and all of a sudden she did what? She quit. And I remember having conversations with people and begging them to come to the board meetings. I need you to speak on the record. I need you to lend a voice to this issue in addition to mine, because they're not listening to me.
Right, to amplify.
Couldn't beg people to come to meetings, couldn't beg people to send emails and contact their elected officials. But when I resigned and I made state or national news, all of a sudden people started saying, who's messing with that baby? What is wrong? Like, what did you all do to her? Because the Jessica I know, the Jessica I put in office, what's wrong with her? Who did what to her? And when I resigned, I quite frankly did not expect the fallout that happened. I didn't expect it to become state news. I didn't expect it to go viral on social media. In fact, all that night I cried myself to sleep. And it was one of the most embarrassing, very public moments of my life. My mom's calling, family members are calling, friends are calling, and they're just all like, what's wrong with you? But I had spent so much time smiling and pretending that everything was okay and not sharing with people. So people were surprised when I ended up resigning. And the next day, the same person I had that conversation with, who essentially called me a token, ended up bringing me flowers to work. They had received numerous phone calls from people across the county, across the state, saying, if you all don't get her back, you'll never serve, so you'll never be reelected in office again. So I'm at work and media showing up, you know, people are calling me, and my receptionist is literally having to tell media, like, she doesn't want to talk, could you please leave? So I finally ended up accepting a phone call of one of my mentors, and at the time the current chair of the Democratic Party, all saying, Jessica, we can walk this back. We can take this back. And I'm like, no, I've made my decision. Like, I'm just gonna, you know, burrow my head in the sand, and hopefully when I come up, people will have forgotten about all of this. One of the most instrumental people in my decision is a woman that I don't know. And I can't recall how she contacted me, but it was through some means of social media. And she said, Jessica, you don't know who I am, and I don't really know you very well. But my daughter, she's a student at A&T, and she adores you, and she follows you. And she called me today and was crying and upset that you quit. Do you not realize how powerful it is and what it means to people like my daughter to see you sitting where you sit? We put you in office because we had expectations that you would stay in office. On behalf of myself and my daughter, I ask you to stay in office. The second person that was most influential actually called me. And I didn't know who she was, really. But I'm very stubborn or strong-headed when it comes to customer service. Because oftentimes, when we interact with people, particularly in our human services department, which is our largest department, our most important department, oftentimes when someone comes to human services, for whatever reason, they're at their lowest moment. Right. They are coming there due to a child welfare situation. They're coming there due to signing up for food stamps. You know, oftentimes we're meeting people at their worst and lowest situations in their life. So I got a call one day at work from a woman I don't know who said, I'm at Human Services. I have 2 kids. There's an issue with processing my food stamps. I have no food and I don't know what to do. And I said, well, surely somewhere in that building has helped you. And she said, well, they gave me a list of pantries and they sent me to a pantry. However, that pantry, once I got there, mind you, she's taking the bus with her 2 kids. She said, I got to this pantry, but it doesn't open on Wednesdays. So I don't know what to do. I'm running out of money. I can't continue, going all around town. And I called Howard Manning, who's executive director of Dorcas Ministries in Cary. And I said, Howard, I have someone that I need you to take care of. They have a food pantry that is essentially like a grocery store where you have the dignity of going in and essentially going grocery shopping. And so I got that person taken care of. And in fact, we put her in a cab and sent her to Dorcas Ministries, who allowed her to essentially go grocery shopping and then provided transportation back to her home. And when I say the follow-up conversation that I had with our human services about customer service, about making sure that our people are taken care of, which goes beyond that checklist on a piece of paper as to whether their stamps go into effect on the 1st of the month or the 15th of the month. You have someone with you before you with 2 kids, and you send them to a pantry that is closed without so much as calling to see if it was open and available. So that was months before I resigned, possibly even years. So all of a sudden I resign, I get a call from whoever this lady is, whose name I never even really got, because I go hard like that when people contact me. I don't play when it comes to human services. I don't play when it comes to serving our children. And that's just not something I'm going to tolerate from within a government that I'm a part of. And so she called me and was like, you probably don't even remember me, but let me tell you what happened. She said, if you had not interceded, if you had not been in place, I don't know what would have happened to me. She said, you showed me kindness when I was at my lowest point, and I don't know who else would have done what you did for me. And of course, I had almost forgotten the situation. For me, it was a regular work day, so to speak, of helping people and doing what I was elected to do. And long story short, there were just so many people that reached out and said, Jessica, you may not remember, but you helped me. Jessica, you may not remember, but that policy that you fought for, that you led on, it made a difference in my life. And I'm just like, where are all these people I couldn't even get to come to board meetings? And now, I have community groups and organizations saying, so what time are the board meetings?
Right.
Do you need me to come speak on an issue? And then all of a sudden there was like this village that swooped in and was like, not today. And you all will not mess. This is our elected official. I got people from across the state calling me their county commissioner, who will oftentimes call me and say, I'm having trouble with my local situation. Can you help me? And often I've now developed a statewide nonprofit network of being able to refer people in different counties, because so many people don't see in their elected officials someone who looks like them or someone who is compassionate about their issues. And I'm not going to have you call me and not provide some level of resource. That's not to say I have a magic wand, but I'm not going to leave people hanging. I'm not going to let a mother with 2 children come before me and send her to a pantry that I haven't ensured is there to provide what she needs. And so all of a sudden people woke up. This is not the greatest example, because I am certainly no Colin Kaepernick, but it reminds me of when he decided to kneel. And he had no idea what would come out of that. And it turned out to be possibly an entire movement. And I would not advise this for anyone, but when it comes to me resigning, it gave me a statewide platform. It made people pay attention to me and what I stand for and the issues that I believe in. And now, when it comes to the board table, that same board table that I resigned from, I ended up serving as chair the following year, and still serving as chair the next year.
Well, we're running out of time, so I want to make sure I cover this. What are your hopes for the future, and what would you say if somebody was thinking about running, why they should, especially women?
I actually had this question come up earlier today when someone said, "I'm afraid. I have this fear, and what am I going to do about it? I want to run for office, but I'm afraid." I've always thought of using fear as fuel. Fear is healthy. Fear is not something that you can take a pill and just get rid of it. I'm fearful every single day. I have now chaired dozens, if not hundreds of meetings from boards and commissions, but every single meeting I'm afraid. But you have to take that fear and use it as fuel. You cannot allow it to debilitate you. You cannot allow it to prevent you from sort of living your destiny. You have to use it. Use that negative energy and try to use it for good. So I would suggest to people to not allow themselves to be their own barrier, because there are going to be enough barriers in the world to stop you or prevent you or to discourage you. But don't you allow your own insecurities of being, a poor black girl that grew up in Eastern North Carolina, don't let those experiences end up being excuses. Let those experiences be testimonies that drive how I serve and the issues that I focus on in my leadership position.
I'm so grateful to meet you, and thank you so much for agreeing to do this interview with us. Do you have any last minute words you'd like to add? Or
I just want to thank you for the opportunity to be here and to have this conversation with you, and for providing a platform for someone like me to share my story, because we don't always get that opportunity with media to speak our truth. And I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to share my truth and to provide some clarification as I'm running for North Carolina Commissioner of Labor, and people Google Jessica Holmes and they see these articles that pop up and say Jessica Holmes resigned. What I'd say about that is Jessica Holmes fell down and Jessica Holmes got up and has been doing the damn thing
and is stronger than ever.
And is stronger than ever. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much again, and I look forward to seeing your name on the ballot.
And in the elevators.
Oh yes, we need some new pictures.
Yes.
Bringing some style to the elevator. Well, again, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.